After that, I started doing my own research as far as, the difference between Sunni and Shia and what Shias believe. I ran into Hussein Maki online, and I was speaking to him. He cleared up a lot of misconceptions, a lot of the lies that you hear from people about Shias, and he was, kind of just destroying all these arguments. And he gave me and then I was guided, right? I read that they had an online version. And then I read that, and I found that there was a Shia masjid. I knew there was a Shia masjid in Kissimmee. And it's really funny. I was watching a video on YouTube from the Muharram Jalus, and I saw the brother in the YouTube video that worked at the mall by my apartment, right? And the funny thing about this is back when I was just a young punk acting stupid, I remember I went into that mall drunk one time, and this was not too long, probably a few years, but after 9/11, and me just being drunk and stupid, I was abusing this brother, calling him a terrorist and calling him all these things, and so now here it is years later, I'm going to him telling him, tell me about Shia Islam, and it's funny how things work, because he could have told me, get out of here, go away, because he remembered me, he knew who I was, He sat down with me and he explained to me, and he brought me to the masjid, So I got to the masjid, and I prayed there, I met the sheikh there. One of the brothers gave me Peshawar Nights to read, and I read Peshawar Nights, and the arguments in there were so good, using Sunni sources and just using logic, and after I read that, it was so hard to kind of just disregard the arguments, At a certain point, I did try to go back to the Sunni masjid, to try to see, somebody, for instance, somebody told me one time, while I was there at the Sunni masjid, they said, oh, all these Shia hadith, they say our Sunni hadith have all the sanad, all, but these Sunni hadith, they'll just say from a group of our people, and they're like, who are these people? There's no actual chain of narrators, but it didn't feel right. Something wasn't right there. A lot of the other arguments that they gave me about Shia Islam were just not consistent. It was very because you have a difference between somebody saying, okay, look, this is Sahih Bukhari, and it says this, and we say the same thing, and then somebody saying, oh, brother, these Shias say this and they say that. It's like night and day. You have a logical argument using, Sunni sources, and then you have somebody telling you, yeah, well, they do this and they do, but, a lot of people say a lot of things, so you can't compare the two. So yeah, I definitely, after a while, I stuck with the school of Ahlul Bayt, alhamdulillah. I also learned about the event of Mubahala, and you find out that these people that were there, that are talked about, were Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam, So, it just seemed clear. It was very clear to me. Everything matched up, and there was so much opposition, so much antagonism from a lot of people. As far as the thing about me, I guess, and maybe other people in the West too, is the more that you tell them to stay away from something, they're just gonna go towards it more, so that didn't help. The treatment of reverts in the community. This community here in Tampa, alhamdulillah, it's pretty good, for the most part, especially the I-4 masjid. The sheikh there is a convert himself, so, but I think on a grander scale, on a larger scale, and definitely in other places, it's not that it's what it is that essentially this is a human problem. You know, racism and prejudice and xenophobia, these are human issues, right? And the purpose of religion is to perfect the human being, right? But healthy people don't go to the hospital, right? So you go to the masjid and you've got a bunch of sick people that are trying to get better, inshallah, right? But, you know, we all act out in different ways. And for some people, you know, this is like, you know, they don't trust converts, or, you know, they'll say, you know, like, don't let your women around them because they're just going to try to marry them, you know, or, you know, they don't know anything about religion, you know, and, I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed. I definitely think like the African American brothers get it worse sometimes, unfortunately. Like for instance, I'll give you one incident that happened to me though. I was praying Jamaat one time. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I came to the Jamaat, but I had missed my Maghrib prayer. So I went to make my Maghrib real quick in between the time of that prayer ending and the Isha Salah. And, I didn't make kunut in my prayer, right? Because I was rushing. I was trying to get it done. So I just did like, you know, the rest of it. And this brother in the stuff, you know, he just started yelling at me, you know, like, brother, you didn't do kunut. And, you know, I'm telling him like, kunut is not wajib. You know, it doesn't invalidate your prayer if you don't include the kunut in your prayer. You know, and it was like this, like he was insistent, you know, upon the fact that like you had to make kunut in your prayer. And it just kind of gives this implication of like, you don't know anything about Islam. You know, who are you to tell me, you know? And of course, he was wrong, you know, at the end of the day. But, so it's either stuff like that, like it's like this kind of like assumption that like, well, you must not know anything about Islam, right? Or it's this assumption that like, well, it's like either you get made to feel like you don't know anything, or you're kind of paraded around, you know? You're like a little trophy that they carry around, like, oh, mashallah, brother, you know, you're this and so, and it's like, you just want to be treated like a normal person, you know? It's like, you don't want to be insulted, but you don't want to be patronized either, you know? So it's like it's just one extreme or the other, and, so, you know, and maybe, you know, I mean, to a certain extent it's true. Like, you know, a lot of people I don't think look for, religion or look for God if there's not something that's kind of lacking, right? So, definitely I think a lot of reverts come from having some kind of issues in their life, but at the same time, you know, I don't think there should be this assumption that like, because you reverted, that, you know, you had like some unspeakable past before your reversion, you know, cause it's different people are motivated by different things, you know. For my case, you know, I did some pretty bad stuff, before I became Muslim, but other people, it varies, you know. Well, of course, inshallah, you know, there's a lot every day that I need to be better at, you know. I mean, I think we should all be striving to have a better connection with him, inshallah. But there's a few events from like the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam that stick out to me, right? Like, for instance, the time when Imam Ali alayhi salam was in battle, and, you know, he was about to kill the guy. And the guy he spat on him, and Imam Ali alayhi salam walked away. You know, and when he was asked, you know, why did you walk away? And he said, you know, I came to kill you for the sake of Allah, but then you spat on me, and if I would have killed you, it would have been for the sake of my ego. So I left. You know, and this is, even though, you know, I mean, my temper is unfortunately one of my, weak points, but this is something that inshallah is a very good example about, you know, not reacting out of emotion or because of your ego. As far as Ashura goes, the events in Karbala, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Uh, I think for a lot of people that become Shia, this is something that's very hard to accept, you know, because you're made to think that everybody who said they were Muslim back then was pious and upright, and, you know, you don't even think about the possibility that, like, they would kill the Prophet's own family. I mean, that's like, it's such a horrible thing that you don't even think to that extent. Like, okay, if these people were bad, you don't even include that as a possibility, you know, maybe they did this, this, and this, but you would never think they would kill the grandson of the Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, because this is, for one, you know, I think a lot of people don't even hear about Imam Hussein, alayhi salam, or if you do, you know, I've heard, like, somebody said, you know, to us it was like he never grew up, you know, he was just a child. In all the hadith, it was like about him as a kid, you know, Imam Hussein as a child with the Prophet. And then you never hear about when Imam Hussein grows up and becomes an adult, what happens, right? And then you come to find out later, what happened was, you know, he was killed by people who called themselves Muslim. I think now that I've reflected on it, I've listened to lectures about it, one thing I've taken away from it, and I think this is very pertinent to the times that we're in today, is that, you know, you had Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stops everybody on the day of Ghadir, right? All these people on the day of Ghadir in the burning hot desert, he stops them and he tells people, you know, first of all, you're not going to stop that many people coming back from Hajj in the middle of the hot desert to tell them anything frivolous, right? I mean, even if you don't accept that everything that Prophet said was from Allah, it's just bad o'clock to do that. If I stop everybody in the middle of the desert, I better have something good to say, right? So he stops everybody in the middle of the desert and says, do I not have more authority over the believers than they have over their own souls, right? And then, you know, we all know it says, okay, you know, whoever I am his master, this Ali is also his master, right? So there's automatically like a diversion here, you know. Prophet is trying to set up the continuation of spiritual guidance after his death, right? He wants his spiritual teaching to continue. However, you have other people, and, you know, we won't go into details, but we have other people that they were more concerned about temporal power. They were more concerned about, you know, worldly gain and politics. Not that politics in itself is something bad, but, you know, politics as in the kind that tries to gain off of people, you know. And I think that in today's times, with a lot of the things that we see done in the name of Islam, it's the same kind of thing, you know. There's a lack of spirituality. There's a lack of, you know, preferring the spiritual over the material. And this is why, for instance, we see things like in Saudi Arabia, where there's so much opulence, even surrounding the Kaaba, you know, surrounding the Haramain. You have skyscrapers and, you know, big, expensive buildings and, you know, golden palaces and all this stuff. And you have people starving on the streets, you know. Why? Because there's so much greed for what can I get in this life? You know, what can I do to enjoy myself? And, meanwhile, you know, you are exhausting your chance in this world to try to grow spiritually and to benefit, in the hereafter, you know. And, I think that this is something that really can be gained, inshallah, from the events of Karbala if people were to reflect on them.